I've given 25 years to this company, 25 years of early mornings, late nights, and weekends sacrificed on the altar of ambition. I've clawed my way through boardroom battles, navigated corporate politics with a smile, and built a legacy I thought was untouchable. My name, Ruth, was synonymous with grit and results at Apex Dynamics. I was the woman who turned failing divisions into gold mines, who mentored the brightest minds, who made the impossible happen. So when I walked into the conference room that Tuesday morning, I expected a discussion about the next big project, maybe a pat on the back for the latest quarterly numbers. Instead, I walked into an ambush. The room was cold, sterile, with that faint hum of overhead lights that always made my skin crawl. At the head of the table sat Greg, the CEO, with his perfectly pressed suit and a face I couldn't read. Beside him was Tara, the HR director, clutching a folder like it was a grenade. My stomach twisted as I took my seat, the leather chair creaking under me. Something was wrong. I could feel it in the air, heavy and suffocating, like the moment before a storm breaks. Greg didn't meet my eyes. He just cleared his throat and started talking about organizational realignment and difficult decisions. My mind raced, trying to keep up. But my heart already knew. They were letting me go. The words hit like a physical blow. Terminated. After a quarter century of loyalty, after pouring my soul into this place, they were discarding me like a used tissue. My hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white, as Tara slid the termination agreement across to me. Her eyes were apologetic, but her voice was mechanical, reciting legal jargon about severance and non-disclosure. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to remind them of every victory I'd delivered. But I didn't. I sat there frozen as the weight of it all settled into my bones. How could this happen? I'd given everything to Apex. I'd sacrificed friendships, delayed starting a family, and ignored the whispers of burnout for the sake of this company. And now I was nothing to them. Greg finally looked at me, his expression a mix of pity and discomfort. He mumbled something about the board's decision and how it wasn't personal. Not personal. My entire life had been personal to this place. I thought of the countless times I'd stood by his side during crises, the late night strategy sessions, the risks I'd taken to protect his reputation. I thought of the younger executives I'd trained like Elise, who'd risen through the ranks under my wing. Had they known? Had they stood by while this decision was made? The room blurred as anger and disbelief churned inside me. A bitter cocktail that burned my throat. I signed the agreement in silence, my pen shaking, just enough to betray the storm within. When I stood, my legs felt unsteady, but I forced myself to walk out with my head held high. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. The hallway stretched endlessly as I made my way to my office, each step echoing in the quiet. I passed by cubicles where colleagues avoided my gaze, their silence louder than any words. They all knew, and yet no one had warned me. The betrayal stung deeper than the termination itself, a gnawing suspicion that someone, maybe someone I trusted, had orchestrated this. In my office, I packed up 25 years of my life into a single cardboard box. Framed awards photos from company retreats, a stress ball I'd squeezed during endless calls, they all felt like relics of a life that no longer belonged to me. I lingered over a photo of me and Elise at last year's gala, her smile bright as she thanked me for believing in her. Had that been a lie, or had she turned on me when it mattered most? I tucked the photo into the box, my chest tight with doubt. As I walked out of Apex Dynamics for the last time, the weight of the box in my arms felt like the weight of my legacy. I'd built something extraordinary here, something they couldn't erase no matter how many papers I signed. But that suspicion, that sharp edge of betrayal, cut deeper than the loss of my job. Someone had done this to me, someone I knew, and as I stepped into the grey light of the parking lot, I made a silent vow I would find out who. I sat in my car in the parking lot of Apex Dynamics. For what felt like hours, the cardboard box of my past life resting heavily on the passenger seat. The engine was off, the silence oppressive, broken only by the occasional distant hum of a passing car. My fingers gripped the steering wheel, though I wasn't going anywhere, not yet. I couldn't. My mind was a storm of fragmented memories, replaying my rise at this company, trying to pinpoint where it all went wrong. I needed to understand how I, Ruth, the unshakable force of Apex, had become disposable. I remembered my first day here 25 years ago, a wide-eyed analyst with a cheap suit and a hunger to prove myself. I'd been underestimated, dismissed as just another eager face in a sea of corporate drones. But I'd shown them. I stayed late, learned fast, and took risks no one else dared. By my 30s, I was leading teams, turning around failing projects, and earning the respect of even the most skeptical executives. Franklin and Associates, as Apex was called back then, felt like home. The culture was raw, competitive, but fiercely loyal. We fought for each other. I mentored countless young professionals, people like Elise, who'd come to me with raw talent and left with polished confidence. I built alliances, not just networks, relationships I thought were unbreakable, or so I'd believed. But something shifted a few years back, subtle at first, like a draft you can't quite locate. New partners arrived after a merger, sleek and ambitious, with polished smiles and a language of efficiency that felt foreign to me. They spoke of streamlining, of cutting dead weight, their eyes lingering on those of us who'd been here longest. Meetings grew colder, less collaborative, more about numbers than people. I'd noticed the sideways glances, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room. I'd told myself it was paranoia, that my track record spoke for itself. I doubled revenue in my division just 2 years ago. How could they doubt me? But now, sitting in this car with the sting of termination still fresh, I saw it clearly. They'd been planning this for months, maybe years. I hadn't been paranoid, I'd been blind. Elisa's face kept creeping into my thoughts. She'd been my protege, my pride. I'd spent hours coaching her, sharing strategies. I'd learned the hard way, celebrating her wins like they were my own. Last year at the gala, she'd raised a glass to me in front of everyone, calling me her rock. But had she known about this, she'd been promoted to a senior role 6 months ago, closer to the new partners than I'd realised. I remembered a conversation in the break room weeks before the ambush, when she'd avoided my gaze, muttering something vague about changes coming. I'd brushed it off as stress. Now that memory felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Had she been complicit? Had she traded our bond for a rung on the ladder? My hands trembled as I pulled the photo of us from the box, staring at her bright smile. I wanted to believe she'd been as blindsided as I was, that she'd fought for me behind closed doors. But doubt gnawed at me, a relentless whisper, that maybe loyalty meant less to her than I'd thought. Maybe it meant less to everyone now. The culture I'd helped build at Franklin and Associates, that foundation of trust, had eroded under the weight of new priorities. I'd been too busy winning battles to notice I was losing the war. I tossed the photo back into the box, my chest tightening with a mix of anger and grief. I wasn't just mourning a job. I was mourning an era, a version of myself that believed hard work and integrity were enough. The new Apex dynamics didn't value that. They valued agility, youth compliance, things I couldn't or wouldn't mold myself into. But had I really been edged out for those reasons, or was there something darker at play? That suspicion from earlier, the one that clawed at me as I walked out, returned with sharper claws. Someone had orchestrated this. Someone who knew my strengths and weaknesses intimately. Someone who'd once called me a friend. I turned the key in the ignition, the engine's low rumble breaking the silence. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay here, staring at the building that had once been my kingdom. As I pulled out of the lot, a cold resolve settled over me. I'd spent 25 years building, sacrificing, trusting. If loyalty was dead at Apex, then so be it. I'd find out who betrayed me, and I'd make them regret underestimating Ruth. I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. But first I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to start. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours after leaving Apex Dynamics, the city lights blurring into streaks through the windshield. My mind was a battlefield torn between the ache of betrayal and the flicker of defiance that refused to die. The box of my old life still sat on the passenger seat, a silent reminder of everything I'd lost. But as the miles ticked by, something else began to stir beneath the hurt, a realization that I wasn't as powerless as I felt. I'd built something at Apex, something bigger than a title or a corner office. I'd built trust, the kind that doesn't vanish with a severance package. And now that trust was starting to call me back. The first message came late that night as I sat in my dimly lit living room, a glass of untouched whiskey in my hand. My phone buzzed and I almost ignored it, assuming it was another meaningless condolence from a distant colleague. But the name on the screen stopped me cold. Margaret Henshaw. Margaret wasn't just any client. She was one of my first and no-nonsense CEO of a mid-sized manufacturing firm who'd been with me for nearly 15 years. I'd guided her through hostile takeovers, supply chain disasters, and boardroom coups. She didn't just rely on me. She trusted me with the kind of vulnerability executives rarely show. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen, then answered. Ruth, what the hell is going on? Her voice was sharp, laced with concern. I just heard you're no longer at Apex. Is it true? I swallowed hard, the confirmation sticking in my throat like a stone. I told her yes, keeping my voice steady though inside I was crumbling. She didn't ask for details she didn't need to. Margaret had always read between the lines. This doesn't add up, she said after a pause. You're the only reason I stayed with Apex all these years. I don't know who they think can replace you, but I'm not interested in finding out. We need to talk, soon. She hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at the phone, a strange warmth blooming in my chest. It wasn't just her words, it was the conviction behind them. I mattered to her more than I'd realized. The next morning, another call came, this time from David Tran, a tech entrepreneur whose startup I'd helped scale into a regional powerhouse. His tone was different, less sharp, more bewildered. Ruth, I got an email from some new account manager at Apex introducing themselves. What's this about? You're my point person. Always have been. I could hear the unease in his voice, the unspoken question. Had I abandoned him? I reassured him I hadn't left by choice, keeping the bitterness out of my voice. And he fell silent for a moment. That's not right, he finally said. You've got my loyalty, Ruth. I don't know what's happening over there, but I'm not happy about it. Let me know what you're planning next. I'm in. His words hit me like a wave, both a comfort and a burden. I didn't have a plan, not yet, but the expectation in his voice ignited something in me, a spark of possibility I hadn't felt since that humiliating walk out of Apex. By the end of the week, my inbox was a flood of messages and my voicemail was full. Clients I hadn't heard from in months, even years, were reaching out, their questions echoing the same sentiment. Why was I gone? And what did it mean for them? Some were angry on my behalf, others simply confused, but all of them carried a thread of reliance that I hadn't fully grasped until now. I wasn't just a consultant or a strategist to these people. I was their anchor, their confidant, the one who'd fought their battles when the stakes were highest. Apex might have cut me loose, but they hadn't severed those bonds. If anything, they'd underestimated their strength. Sitting at my kitchen table, surrounded by scribbled notes and half-empty coffee mugs, I felt the weight of this newfound power settling over me. These clients weren't just reaching out with sympathy, they were looking to me for direction, for a way forward. And in their voices, I heard something else: distrust toward Apex. The company had banked on a seamless transition, on replacing me with someone younger, cheaper, more compliant. But they hadn't accounted for the human element, the relationships I'd nurtured over decades. I could feel the ground shifting beneath me, the possibility of leverage forming like a storm on the horizon. Could I turn this into something more than personal vindication? Could I rebuild on my own terms? But as I stared at the list of names, Margaret David and dozens more, a shadow of doubt crept in. Trust is a double-edged sword. It binds you to others, but it also makes you vulnerable. What if Apex caught wind of these whispers? What if they retaliated not just against me, but against the clients who dared to question their decision? I'd already lost so much. Could I risk dragging others into this fight, especially if I wasn't sure I could win? My hand hovered over the phone, Margaret's number glowing on the screen. I needed to decide how far I was willing to go, and fast, because once I made this move, there'd be no turning back. I was still staring at Margaret's number on my phone, the weight of indecision pressing down on me, when another call broke through the silence. The name on the screen sent a jolt through my chest. Arthur Kessler, the founder of Apex Dynamics, the man who'd built the firm from a scrappy startup into a powerhouse, the one whose vision I'd poured my soul into for over 2 decades. I hadn't heard from him in years, not since he'd stepped back into a shadowy emeritus role, leaving the day-to-day to the board and their rotating cast of CEOs. My finger trembled as I answered, a mix of dread and curiosity, churning in my gut. Ruth, his voice came through gravelly and slower than I remembered, but still carrying that old authority. I've been meaning to call. I heard what happened. There was a pause heavy with unspoken history. I didn't respond immediately. I couldn't. My mind raced back to the early days when Arthur had been more than a name on a plaque. He'd been a mentor, the one who'd seen potential in a young, unpolished consultant, and handed me the keys to my first big accounts. Back then, I'd believed in him as much as I'd believed in Apex. But now, hearing his voice after all this time, after the betrayal that had stripped me of everything, I felt a bitter edge sharpen inside me. I'm sorry it came to this. He continued, his tone softer, almost regretful. I know how much you gave to the firm, more than anyone, probably even more than me in the end. His words stung, not because they were unkind, but because they felt like a hollow epitaph. Sorry wasn't enough. I wanted to scream, to demand why he hadn't fought for me, why he'd let the board, these short-sighted, number-obsessed suits, cast me out like I was disposable. But I held my tongue, waiting, because I sensed he wasn't done. It wasn't personal, Ruth, he said finally, and I could almost see him leaning back in some mahogany-lined office, his hands folded, as if this were just another strategic discussion. The board needed to show the investors a pivot. They needed a scapegoat to justify the quarterly losses, to prove they were streamlining for growth. You were the highest profile name they could cut without breaking the machine. I argued against it, but I don't have the pull I used to. His voice dipped, a faint crack of frustration breaking through, but it did nothing to soften the blow. I was a sacrifice, a name on a chopping block to appease faceless shareholders, a pawn in a game of optics and earnings reports. My years of loyalty, the sleepless nights, the victories I'd bled for, they'd been weighed against a spreadsheet and found wanting. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles whitening. So that's it. I managed my voice low, trembling with a fury I could barely contain. You let them throw me under the bus for a PR stunt. After everything I built for Apex. There was silence on the other end, and in that void I felt the full weight of my expendability. Arthur, the man I'd once idolized, hadn't just failed to protect me. He'd stood by while the firm he created chewed me up and spat me out. The realization burned hotter than the initial betrayal, because it stripped away the last illusion I'd clung to, that somewhere deep down, Apex still had a soul. Ruth, I wish I could have done more, he said at last. His words slow, deliberate, but I'm not calling just to apologize. I'm calling because I think you're stronger than they realize. They made a mistake underestimating you, and I think you know it. His tone shifted, carrying a hint of the old fire I remembered from boardroom battles long past. Was he suggesting something, a way to fight back? Or was this just another empty gesture? A way to soothe his own guilt? My mind spun, caught between suspicion and a desperate need to believe there was still a path forward. I sat there frozen as his words hung in the air. My gaze drifted to the notes on my kitchen table, names of clients who'd reached out, people who still believed in me. Arthur's call had cracked open a raw, painful truth. I'd been a pawn in a game I hadn't even known I was playing. But it also stirred something else, a whisper of defiance that refused to be silenced. If Apex thought they could erase me so easily, they were wrong. I had allies I had trust, and now I had a bitter clarity about who my enemies truly were. But as I stared at the phone, Arthur's number still glowing on the screen, a new fear coiled in my chest. What if striking back meant crossing lines I couldn't uncross? What if this fight consumed me in ways I couldn't yet imagine? I needed to decide right now whether I was ready to turn this pain into a weapon, or if I was still too broken to wield it. I sat at my kitchen table, the phone still warm in my hand from Arthur's call, his words echoing like a distant storm in my mind. They'd underestimated me, he'd said, stronger than they realized. It was a spark, small but persistent, flickering against the heavy shadow of betrayal that had cloaked me for weeks. I looked at the scattered notes in front of me, names of clients who'd reached out after the news broke, their messages, a mix of condolences and quiet offers of support. I hadn't responded to any of them yet. I hadn't known if I could. But now, with Arthur's voice lingering, that flicker of defiance began to catch, warming something long dormant in my chest. I picked up a pen, my hand trembling not with fear, but with a strange, unfamiliar energy, and started writing down a plan. Not a grand strategy, not yet just a list of who I could trust, who might still see me as Ruth, the woman who'd fought for their interests, not the discarded executive Apex had painted me as. The first name I wrote was Eleanor Bryce, the CFO of a mid-sized tech firm I'd advised through a brutal merger 3 years ago. She'd been one of the first to email after my firing. Her note, short but sharp: Ruth, I don't believe a word of their nonsense. Call me when you're ready. I hadn't called. I'd been too buried in my own shame to face anyone. But now, staring at her name, I felt the stir of something like hope. Or maybe it was just stubbornness refusing to let go. I dialed her number before I could overthink it, my heart thudding as the line rang. When she answered, her voice was warm, almost relieved. Ruth, thank God. I've been waiting to hear from you. There was no pity in her tone, only the brisk confidence I remembered from late night strategy sessions. I stumbled through an explanation about the board's decision, the public humiliation, the way I'd been sidelined. She listened, interrupting only to mutter a curse under her breath when I mentioned the press release. Apex had spun to pin their losses on strategic missteps tied to my name. When I finished, there was a beat of silence, and I braced myself for the inevitable platitudes. Instead, she laughed, a short, cutting sound. They're idiots, Ruth. They think cutting you loose makes them look decisive, but they've just handed their best asset to the open market. I want in. Whatever you're planning next, I'm with you. My board will follow if I push, and I will. Her words hit me like a shockwave, raw and unprompted. I hadn't asked for her loyalty, hadn't even hinted at a next move, and yet here she was offering it freely. I managed a shaky thank you, promising to follow up soon, but as I hung up, my hands were trembling for a different reason. It wasn't just gratitude. It was the weight of possibility, the sudden reality that I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. Over the next few hours, I made more calls, each one a gamble, each one peeling back a layer of the despair that had held me captive. Some were hesitant, their voices tinged with corporate caution, but others, more than I dared to hope, echoed Eleanor's resolve. A manufacturing exec I'd saved from a hostile takeover 5 years back told me point blank he'd rather work with me out of a garage than with Apex's new blood. A retail chain VP whose expansion I'd orchestrated said she'd been waiting for me to resurface, that half her team still spoke my name like it was a talisman. Client after client offered to follow me their trust. A quiet revolt I hadn't seen coming, a rebellion I hadn't even whispered into existence. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the growing list of names, each one a tiny act of defiance against the machine that had cast me out. I hadn't planned, this hadn't orchestrated a single move, but it was happening anyway. A network was forming not out of pity, but out of belief in me, in what I could still build. My chest tightened with something I hadn't felt in months' purpose. But as the day waned and shadows stretched across my kitchen, a new fear crept in alongside the exhilaration. These people were betting on me, putting their faith in a woman who'd been broken down to her foundations. What if I couldn't deliver? What if this quiet uprising, this fragile revolt crumbled under the weight of my own doubts? I gripped the edge of the table, caught between the pull of newfound strength and the dread of failing them all over again, wondering if I was truly ready to lead this rebellion, or if I was just setting us all up for a deeper fall. As the dawn light crept through my kitchen window, I sat surrounded by the remnants of last night's revelations, scribbled notes, a half-empty coffee mug, and my phone buzzing intermittently with messages I hadn't yet dared to open. The weight of yesterday's calls, the voices of trust and belief from clients like Eleanor, still lingered in my chest, a strange cocktail of hope and pressure. I'd gone to bed with a sense of purpose, but sleep had been restless, haunted by the question of whether I could truly carry the faith they'd placed in me. Now, in the stark clarity of morning, I felt the magnitude of what was unfolding. This wasn't just a comeback. It was a chance to rewrite my story, and for the first time in years, I held the pen. I stood pacing the tiled floor, my bare feet cold against the surface as my mind raced. The offers had started trickling in overnight, 3 of them to be exact, each one a lifeline from a different direction. Each one a test of what I wanted my legacy to be. The first came via email from a boutique consulting firm in Chicago, a scrappy outfit I'd crossed paths with years ago during a particularly messy acquisition. Their message was direct, almost hungry. They'd heard about my break from Apex and wanted me to lead their expansion into new markets. Your name still carries weight, Ruth, the CEO, wrote. We're small, but with you, we could be unstoppable. It was flattering, raw, and tempting in its simplicity, a chance to build something gritty, unpolished, away from the corporate glare I'd grown so weary of. But it also meant starting small, perhaps too small, after the heights I'd known at Apex. The second offer arrived through a voicemail from a former colleague, now a partner at a top-tier New York firm. His tone was polished, professional, but warm, with a history that stretched back to late nights, hammering out deals in overlit conference rooms. Ruth, we've got a seat at the table for you, he said, his voice crackling through the static. VP of Strategy, full autonomy, and a team that's dying to learn from you. You'd be back on top in months. It was the kind of role I'd once dreamed of, the kind that screamed power and vindication. I could already imagine walking into their gleaming offices, the whispers of my return, trailing behind me like a cape. But as I replayed the message, a shadow of doubt crept in. Would I just be stepping back into the same machine that had chewed me up and spat me out? Would I be trading one cage for another? The third offer was the most unexpected, delivered in a cryptic text from a venture capitalist I'd met only once at a conference 2 years prior. Heard you're free, Ruth. Let's talk. I'm funding a startup in fintech, and I want you as CEO. High risk, high reward. Name your terms. I stared at the words, my pulse quickening. CEO? The title alone felt like a crown heavy with promise and peril. It wasn't just a job. It was a chance to create something entirely mine, to shape a vision from the ground up. But the words high risk echoed louder than the rest. I knew fintech was a battlefield, unforgiving cutthroat, and littered with the bones of failed ideas. Was I ready to stake everything on a gamble, to lead into uncharted territory? With so much already riding on my shoulders, I sank back into my chair, the weight of these choices pressing down like a physical force. Each offer was a door, each path a different version of Ruth. The boutique firm promised intimacy and grit, a chance to rebuild with my hands dirty. The New York role offered redemption in a familiar arena, a swift return to the spotlight I'd been stripped of. The startup dangled creation itself, a blank canvas with stakes higher than I'd ever faced. My fingers hovered over my phone, itching to reply to commit, but something held me back. What did I want my legacy to be? Not just for me, but for the clients who'd rallied behind me for the rebellion I hadn't even meant to start. Was it about proving Apex wrong with a triumphant return? Or about building something they could never touch? I glanced at the list of names on my table, the network of trust that had sprung up overnight. Eleanor and the others, they weren't just allies, they were a responsibility. Their belief in me was a gift, but also a burden I couldn't ignore. I needed to choose a path that honored, that a path that turned their faith into something real, something lasting. But as I sat there torn between safety and audacity, a deeper fear began to surface. What if I chose wrong? What if I led us all into a future that crumbled, not because of Apex, but because of my own misstep? My breath caught, the morning light suddenly too harsh as I realized the true stakes of this moment. I wasn't just choosing a job, I was choosing who I would become, and I had no idea if I was ready to face the woman I might see in the mirror. As I sat at my kitchen table, the morning's unresolved questions still churning in my mind, my phone vibrated with a sharpness that made me flinch. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't expected to see so soon: Arthur. My former mentor at Apex, the man who'd once guided me through the labyrinth of corporate warfare, but who'd stood silently by as Dominic orchestrated my downfall. My stomach twisted with a mix of curiosity and dread. Why now, after weeks of radio silence? I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the answer button before finally pressing it. His voice came through hurried and strained, a far cry from the composed authority I remembered. Ruth, thank God you picked up. I need to talk to you urgently. Can we meet today? There was a tremor in his tone, a desperation I'd never heard from him before. My first instinct was to say no, to sever the last tie to Apex, with a clean, cold refusal. But something in his urgency piqued my interest. What could possibly make Arthur the unflappable strategist sound like a man on the edge? We agreed to meet at a small tucked-away cafe downtown, far from the gleaming towers of Apex and its watchful eyes. As I walked in, the bell above the door, jingling softly, I spotted him in the corner, hunched over a cup of untouched coffee. His suit was slightly wrinkled, his tie loosened, and the lines on his face seemed deeper than I remembered. He looked up as I approached, his eyes flickering with something between relief and fear. I slid into the seat across from him, keeping my expression neutral, though my heart raced with unspoken questions. Ruth, I know I don't have the right to ask anything of you after everything. He began, his voice low, almost a whisper. But I'm in trouble. Dominic's coming for me next. He's restructuring the entire division, my division, and I'm on the chopping block unless I can prove my value. He paused, his fingers tightening around the coffee cup. I've been working on a new role, something I think could save me, and I want you to take it. It's a director position reporting directly to me. You'd be back at Apex rebuilding your reputation with my full support. We could protect each other. I sat back, the words sinking in like stones into still water, sending ripples through my carefully guarded composure. A return to Apex, the very place that had stripped me of everything: my title, my pride, my sense of self. And yet Arthur framed it as salvation, as if stepping back into that viper's nest under his wing could erase the past. I studied his face, searching for the man who'd once taught me how to navigate power, but all I saw was a drowning man clutching at straws. His desperation was palpable, and it made me feel something unexpected, not pity, but a cold, clear certainty. Arthur, Do you honestly think I'd walk back into Apex after what Dominic did to me? After you stood by and watched? My voice was steady, sharper than I'd intended, but I didn't soften it. You're not offering me a lifeline. You're asking me to be your shield to prop up your crumbling position, while Dominic sharpens his knife for us both. He flinched, his jaw tightening, but he didn't deny it. Ruth, I know I failed you. I should have fought harder. But this isn't just about me. It's about survival for both of us. You've got offers, I'm sure, but none of them will carry the weight of Apex on your resume. You come back with me and we rewrite the narrative together. We show Dominic he can't bury us. His words hung between us, heavy with promises I knew he couldn't keep. I saw through it all, the calculated flattery, the veiled manipulation, the way he dangled a tainted version of redemption like bait. My mind flashed to the offers on my table at home, each one a different path untainted by Apex's shadow. The boutique firm in Chicago, the VP role in New York, the CEO gamble in fintech, they were mine to choose free of this baggage. And yet, sitting across from Arthur, I felt the pull of unfinished business, the ghost of my past whispering that maybe, just maybe, I could reclaim something from the ruins of Apex. But as I looked into his pleading eyes, a deeper realization crystallized. This wasn't about redemption or survival. This was about power, his desperation to keep it, and my chance to redefine it on my own terms. I leaned forward, my voice low and deliberate. Arthur, I appreciate the offer, but I need to think about what's best for me now, not for Apex, not for you. His face fell, a flicker of panic crossing his features, and in that moment, I felt something shift inside me, a resolve I hadn't known I possessed, hardening like steel. I stood to leave the chair, scraping softly against the floor, my mind already racing beyond this cafe, beyond Arthur's crumbling empire. As I pushed open the door, the cold air hitting my face, a question lingered sharp and urgent. If I walked away from Apex for good, what kind of power would I build in its place? And was I ready to face the cost of finding out? As I stepped out of the cafe, the cold air biting at my skin, Arthur's pleading eyes lingered in my mind like a persistent shadow. I walked with purpose, though my heels clicking against the pavement each step, a declaration that I was no longer the woman who'd been broken by Apex. His offer, a return to the very battlefield where I'd been humiliated, had stirred something in me, not nostalgia, but a fierce determination to carve my own path, one far from his desperate grasp. I didn't need his protection or Apex's tarnished name. I needed something greater, something mine. Back at my apartment, I spread out the other offers on my kitchen table, each letterhead a promise of a different future. The boutique firm in Chicago offered stability, a chance to rebuild quietly. The VP role in New York screamed ambition, a fast track to influence in a city that never slept. And the CEO gamble in fintech, risky, unproven, but a seat at the top if I could weather the storm. I traced my fingers over the words, feeling the weight of choice, the power to redefine myself. But as I deliberated, my phone buzzed again, this time with a news alert that stopped my breath cold. Franklin and Associates hit by client exodus. Amidst leadership scandal, the headline screamed. My heart raced. Franklin and Associates, Dominic's new empire. The one he'd built after Apex. The one he'd used to bury me further by poaching my clients after my fall. I clicked the article, my pulse thundering in my ears. The piece detailed a mass departure of key clients, citing internal mismanagement and ethical concerns tied to Dominic's aggressive tactics. Whispers of overbilling, broken promises, and even legal probes into their contracts had surfaced, and the industry was turning its back. I couldn't help but smile, a bitter, triumphant curve of my lips. I hadn't lifted a finger, hadn't sought revenge in the petty, direct ways I'd once fantasized about late at night when the pain of betrayal kept me awake. No, this was better. This was justice unfolding on its own, a cosmic reckoning for the man who'd orchestrated my downfall, with a smug grin, thinking he was untouchable. I scrolled through the comments industry insiders, openly condemning Franklin and Associates, some even mentioning my name as the better alternative, a consultant. They regretted losing to Dominic's schemes. I leaned back in my chair, a warmth spreading through me, not of vindication but of possibility. The article wasn't just a takedown of Dominic, it was a spotlight on the void I could fill. My inbox, once a graveyard of rejections and polite declines, was now alive with messages I hadn't noticed in the haze of Arthur's call. Former clients, competitors, even headhunters, all reaching out, their tones varying from apologetic to eager, asking if I was available, if I was considering new ventures. One email from a major client I'd lost to Franklin and Associates 2 years ago stood out. Ruth, we made a terrible mistake following Dominic. If you're open to it, we'd like to discuss bringing our business back to you exclusively. My breath caught. This wasn't just a door opening, it was an entire horizon. I stood pacing the small confines of my kitchen, my mind alight with strategy. I didn't need Apex or Arthur's tainted olive branch. I didn't need to claw my way back into a system that had chewed me up. The industry was shifting under Dominic's collapse, and I was becoming its new center of gravity. I saw it clearly now, my own firm built on the ashes of his arrogance, a place where ethics and excellence weren't just buzzwords, but the foundation. I'd hire the talent he'd discarded, win back the clients he'd alienated, and show the world that Ruth Harper wasn't a footnote in someone else's story. I was the story. But as I sat back down, drafting a response to that client, a whisper of doubt crept in. Was I ready to step into this spotlight to bear the weight of expectation after so long in the shadows? Dominic's fall was justice, yes, but it also meant every eye would be on me, waiting for my next move, waiting perhaps for me to stumble again. I typed my reply, my fingers steady despite the tremor in my chest, agreeing to a meeting. I hit send, the soft click of the keyboard echoing in the quiet room, and felt the ground shift beneath me. This was my moment, but as I stared at the screen, a question burned brighter than my newfound power. Could I truly lead this resurgence, or would the ghosts of my past pull me back into the abyss? I woke the next morning with a fire in my chest, the kind of restless energy that demanded action. My apartment, once a sanctuary of quiet defeat, now felt like a war room. The email I'd sent last night to that major client agreeing to meet pulsed in my mind like a beacon. Every sip of coffee, every glance at the city skyline through my window carried a new weight. I wasn't just rebuilding, I was redefining. But the doubt that had crept in last night hadn't vanished with the sunrise. It lingered a shadow, asking if I could handle the glare of the spotlight I was about to step into. By mid-morning, I was already on a call with that client, their voice crackling with urgency through the speakerphone. They wanted me back not just as a consultant, but as a partner in a larger vision. Their words, trust integrity vision, were a balm to the wounds Dominic had inflicted when he'd poached them with slick promises and underhanded deals. I listened, my pen scribbling notes, my heart swelling with a mix of pride and trepidation. This wasn't just a contract. It was a vote of confidence, a chance to reclaim what I'd lost. But as we set a date for an in-person meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping onto a tightrope, one where every move would be scrutinized by an industry eager for drama. That afternoon, I met with a lawyer friend, Sarah, at a quiet diner downtown. I needed advice on structuring my next steps, perhaps a new firm, perhaps a strategic alliance. Over greasy fries and bitter coffee, I laid out my vision, a consultancy built on transparency, one that would stand in stark contrast to the wreckage Dominic had left behind at Franklin and Associates. Sarah's sharp eyes studied me as I spoke, her nods slow and deliberate. She warned me about the legal landmines, non-competes I'd signed at Apex, potential lawsuits from Dominic if he felt threatened by my rise. He's wounded Ruth, she said, her voice low. A cornered animal is dangerous. He'll come for you if he senses you're a threat. Her words sent a chill down my spine, not of fear, but of clarity. I hadn't considered that Dominic's downfall might make him more vicious, not less. Back home, I pored over documents, old contracts, and emails from headhunters and former colleagues who'd reached out in the wake of the news about Franklin and Associates. The momentum was building faster than I'd expected. A tech startup wanted me as an advisor. A mid-sized firm in Boston floated the idea of a merger if I brought my regained clients with me. Each opportunity was a brick in the foundation of something new, something mine. But the weight of it all pressed down on me as the hours ticked by. I'd been out of the game for too long, licking my wounds in the shadows. Could I handle the pace, the politics, the inevitable clashes that came with power? I pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on a cryptic message that had landed in my inbox just before midnight. It was from an anonymous sender titled, simply, Opportunity. The body read, Meet us tomorrow, 3 p.m., Harbourfront Tower. You'll want to hear this. My breath hitched. Harbourfront Tower was a gleaming monument to corporate giants, a place where multi-million-dollar deals were brokered behind glass walls. I didn't recognize the email address, and the vagueness screamed risk. Was this a trap set up by Dominic to discredit me before I could even start? Or was it something bigger, something game-changing? I paced my living room, the city lights flickering beyond my window like a taunt. I hadn't clawed my way out of the abyss just to cower at the first sign of uncertainty. I'd go to that meeting, face whoever awaited me, and seize whatever lay on the table. But as I set my alarm for the next day, a knot tightened in my stomach. This could be the moment that propels me to heights I'd never dreamed of, or it could be the trap that drags me back into the mud. I turned off the lights, the darkness amplifying every doubt, every hope. Tomorrow I'd walk into Harbourfront Tower with my head high, but the question gnawed at me as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. What if this mysterious offer wasn't a lifeline, but a noose waiting to tighten around my neck? Sleep eluded me, the ticking of the clock, a countdown to a reckoning I couldn't yet predict. I woke early the next day, the weight of that anonymous email still pressing against my chest like a stone. The city was just stirring beyond my window, a grey dawn casting long shadows across my living room, as I sipped my coffee, staring at the words on my laptop screen. Meet us tomorrow, 3 p.m. Harbourfront Tower. You'll want to hear this. Every instinct screamed caution, but there was a part of me raw, hungry, and unapologetic that craved the risk. I'd spent too long in the shadows after Dominic and Franklin and Associates tore my world apart. Now, with the industry reeling from Franklin's collapse and Dominic's ousting, the ground beneath me felt unstable but ripe with possibility. This meeting, whatever it was, could be the fulcrum on which my entire future turned. By noon, I was dressed in a tailored navy blazer and pencil skirt, the kind of armor that made me feel untouchable, even if my heart was hammering as I rode the elevator down from my apartment. The ride to Harbourfront Tower felt endless, the cab's stale air thick with my own tension. I replayed every betrayal, every late-night doubt, every moment I'd been forced to kneel after Dominic smeared my name and stole my clients. But I also remembered the calls from yesterday, the client who'd begged me back, the offers piling up in my inbox. I was no longer just the woman who'd been cast aside. I was a force, a name whispered with curiosity and respect in the same breath. Still, as the tower's glass facade loomed ahead, glinting like a blade in the afternoon sun, I wondered if I was walking into a triumph or a trap. Stepping into the lobby at 3 p.m. sharp, I felt the weight of every eye on me. The marble floors echoed under my heels, the air sharp with the scent of ambition and power. I approached the reception desk, my voice steady as I asked for directions to the meeting. The receptionist's polite smile faltered for a split second, as if she knew something I didn't, before directing me to the 42nd floor. The elevator ride was a silent ascension, each floor ticking by like a heartbeat. My reflection in the mirrored walls looked composed, but inside I was a storm of questions. Who had sent that email? Was it a rival firm looking to poach me before I could rebuild? Or worse, was Dominic behind this orchestrating one last jab to ensure I'd never rise again? When the doors opened, I stepped into a sleek, minimalist conference room, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the sprawling city below. Three figures waited at the far end of a long glass table, two men and a woman, all in impeccably tailored suits, their expressions unreadable. The woman stood as I entered, extending a hand with a measured smile. Ruth, thank you for coming. I'm Evelyn Hart, managing partner at Meridian Capital. My breath caught. Meridian was a titan in the industry, a firm that didn't just play the game, they rewrote the rules. She gestured to her colleagues, introducing them as key stakeholders, their names a blur as I shook hands, my mind racing. Why me? Why now? Evelyn didn't waste time. We've been watching the fallout at Franklin and Associates closely, she said, her voice smooth but piercing. Dominic's ousting was inevitable, but what caught our attention was how quietly you've positioned yourself amid the chaos. The clients returning to you, the whispers of your next moves. We believe you're the architect of this shift, even if you've stayed in the background. My chest tightened. I'd worked in silence, pulling strings to regain trust, to destabilize Dominic's grip, without ever stepping into the spotlight. I hadn't realized how visible my moves had become to players like Meridian. She leaned forward, her gaze locking with mine. We want to partner with you, Ruth. Not as an employee, not as a consultant, but as a leader in a new venture we're launching. You'd have equity, autonomy, and resources beyond what Franklin ever offered. But we need to know if you're ready to step out of the shadows and if you can handle the enemies you've made. Her words were a challenge, a gauntlet thrown at my feet. I felt the weight of Dominic's lingering threat of Franklin's implosion, still sending tremors through the industry. This was the moment I'd clawed my way toward the chance to not just rebuild, but to dominate. But as I opened my mouth to respond, a shadow of doubt flickered. Could I truly lead on this scale with every move watched, every mistake magnified? I smiled, letting the silence hang for a breath longer than necessary. I've been ready for years, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. Evelyn nodded, but her eyes held a glint of something unspoken, a test I hadn't yet passed. As we adjourned to discuss details privately, I felt the floor shift beneath me, not with uncertainty, but with the raw electric thrill of power. Yet, as I followed her down the hall, a chilling thought pierced through the adrenaline. If I'd orchestrated Dominic's fall without anyone noticing, who else in this room might be playing a game? I couldn't yet see. Evelyn's words lingered in the air as I followed her down the polished hallway of Harbourfront Tower, my heels clicking against the marble with a cadence that matched the rapid thrum of my pulse. The thrill of her offer, a leadership role, equity, autonomy at Meridian Capital, coursed through me like wildfire, igniting parts of my ambition I'd long buried under layers of caution and scars. But that chilling thought, the one that had pierced me in the conference room, gnawed at the edges of my euphoria. If I'd dismantled Dominic's empire without anyone tracing the moves back to me. What games might these people be playing? What unseen traps awaited in the shadows of this glittering opportunity? We entered a smaller, more intimate office, its walls adorned with abstract art that screamed wealth without warmth. Evelyn gestured to a leather chair across from her desk, and I sat smoothing my skirt with a composure I didn't fully feel. She poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal decanter, the faint clink of glass against glass the only sound for a moment. Then she fixed me with that same piercing gaze from earlier. Ruth, before we dive into logistics, there's something you should know. Franklin and Associates isn't just collapsing, it's being absorbed by us. And we want you to lead the integration. My breath hitched. Leading the integration meant not just returning to the firm that had once spat me out, but walking back in as its architect, its savior, or its executioner. The weight of it pressed against me, a mix of vindication and dread. Franklin had been my battlefield, the place where Dominic had stripped me of everything: my reputation, my confidence, my sense of self. To step back into that arena, not as a wounded soldier, but as a commander, felt like a poetic full circle. Yet I couldn't shake the image of Arthur Franklin's founder, who'd stood by silently as Dominic orchestrated my downfall. Arthur, with his quiet nods and averted eyes, hadn't wielded the knife, but he'd held the door open for my exit. Would I now be the one to shut the door on him? Evelyn slid a folder across the desk, its contents outlined in stark black and white timelines, financials, and a proposed role for Arthur as a consultant, post-integration. We believe in preserving legacies where possible, she said, her tone measured. Arthur's name still carries weight with certain clients. But we're clear, he's a figurehead, nothing more. You'd hold the reins. I traced the edge of the folder with a fingertip, my mind churning. Offering Arthur a dignified exit wasn't revenge, it was control. It was the chance to look him in the eye, not with the bitterness of the past, but with the quiet power of someone who'd risen above it. Still, the thought of facing him, of seeing recognition, or worse, pity in his gaze, stirred a flicker of unease in my chest. I leaned back, meeting Evelyn's eyes. I'll lead the integration, and I agree on Arthur's role, but I want full transparency on Meridian's long-term vision for Franklin. I won't walk into this blind. My voice was steady, but inside I was a tightrope walker, balancing between the hunger for this role and the instinct to protect myself from unseen blows. Evelyn nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips, as if my demand was exactly what she'd expected. Of course, we'll provide everything you need. But remember, Ruth, control comes with exposure. Every decision you make will be watched not just by us, but by the industry, and by those who'd rather see you fail. Her words landed like a stone in still water, rippling through me. Exposure. I'd spent years rebuilding in the shadows, my every move calculated to avoid scrutiny. Now I'd be stepping into a spotlight so bright it could either forge me into something unbreakable or burn me to ash. I thought of Dominic, wherever he was likely scheming his own comeback. Would he see my rise as a challenge, a reason to strike again? And Arthur, would he accept this consultant role with grace? Or would he harbour resentment, a quiet venom that could poison everything I was building? As Evelyn stood to escort me to meet the rest of the Meridian team, I felt the ground beneath me shift again, not with fear, but with the raw electric promise of what lay ahead. I was no longer just rebuilding, I was redefining. Yet as I walked beside her, a whisper of doubt curled through me. Had I just agreed to a role that would honour my past, or one that would force me to confront every wound I'd tried to bury, with no guarantee I'd emerge whole? As I sit in my new corner office at Meridian Capital, the panoramic view of the city skyline stretching out before me feels like a hard-won crown. The glass walls reflect the golden hue of late afternoon, casting a warm glow over the sleek desk and the framed contracts that symbolize every battle I've fought. I trace my fingers over the edge of one such document, the final integration plan for Franklin and Associates, now a mere extension of Meridian's empire under my command. It's surreal sitting here, no longer the woman who was cast out, humiliated and broken, but the one who rebuilt herself from the rubble. There's no bitterness in my chest anymore, no burning need for revenge. Time, patience, and an unshakable belief in my worth have been my weapons, far sharper than any vendetta could ever be. I lean back in my chair, the leather creaking softly, and let my mind drift to the first days of this journey at Meridian. When Evelyn handed me the reins of the integration, I felt the weight of every eye on me, colleagues, industry insiders, even Arthur himself, whose quiet acquiescence to his consultant role masked a storm I could sense but not see. The early meetings were a tightrope walk, balancing Meridian's expectations with the need to assert my authority over a firm that had once discarded me. I remember standing in Franklin's old boardroom, the same room where Dominic had smirked as my career crumbled, and addressing the team with a voice that didn't waver even as my heart thundered. Each decision, from restructuring departments to reassigning key accounts, was a brick laid in the foundation of my new legacy. I wasn't just integrating Franklin into Meridian. I was dismantling the ghosts of my past piece by deliberate piece. Arthur was the hardest part. Meeting him face to face after all these years stirred a cocktail of emotions I hadn't anticipated. His silver hair was thinner. His shoulders stooped under the weight of a diminished empire. But his eyes, those same eyes that had avoided mine during my downfall, still held a flicker of pride. I offered him the consultant role, with a professionalism that bordered on coldness, ensuring he understood this wasn't charity, but strategy. He nodded, his voice low, as he thanked me for the opportunity, and I saw something break in him, a quiet resignation. I wanted to feel triumph, but instead there was a hollow pang. I'd taken control, yes, but I'd also stripped him of the only thing he had left, his relevance. In that moment, I realized power isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about the mercy you choose to show. The months that followed were a blur of late nights and strategic maneuvering. Meridian's board watched my every move. Evelyn's piercing gaze, a constant reminder that control came with exposure. I felt the industry's scrutiny, too, whispers of my return rippling through networks I'd once been exiled from. Dominic's name surfaced occasionally in hushed conversations, rumors of his failed ventures, his attempts to claw back relevance. I didn't seek him out. I didn't need to. My rise was my retribution, a silent declaration that he hadn't destroyed me. Every deal I closed, every team I united under Meridian's banner was a testament to the woman I'd become, resilient, deliberate, untouchable. Now, as I gaze out at the city, a sense of peace settles over me. The scars of betrayal, the ache of my downfall, the grit of my rise, they've all woven into something stronger, a tapestry of survival and triumph. I think of my first office, a cramped cubicle at Franklin, where I'd once dreamed of a corner like this. I think of the woman I was, then so eager to prove herself, so unaware of the wolves circling. I've outlasted them all, not through vengeance, but through sheer unrelenting will. My legacy isn't just in the deals I've signed or the titles I've earned. It's in the quiet certainty that I've built something no one can take from me again. Yet as the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows across my office, a flicker of unease stirs. I've secured my place, yes, but the world I've climbed to is one of constant vigilance. Power draws attention, and with it new enemies. I've heard murmurs of rival firms eyeing Meridian's moves, whispers of old grudges resurfacing under new names. Even Evelyn's smile, warm as it's become, sometimes feels like a mask for calculations I can't yet decipher. Have I truly secured my legacy, or have I merely stepped into a larger arena where the games are subtler, but the stakes just as deadly? I lean forward, my reflection sharp in the glass, and wonder if the peace I feel is real or just the calm before the next storm.